Think Indonesia is just about Bali beaches and spicy food? You won't believe what's really happening across these 17,508 islands that most tourists never discover. Wait until you find out about the death penalty for carrying just 5 grams of certain substances, or how 88% of the world's largest Muslim population follows rules so complex that saying yes can actually mean no. Here's the scary part. Some of these Indonesian secrets will completely flip your understanding of Southeast Asia. Number 15. Indonesia has 12 different ways to say no in their official language and several ways to say yes when they actually mean no. In the nation's official language of Bahasa Indonesia, there are 12 ways of saying no, and several ways of saying yes when the actual meaning is no. Picture this. You're negotiating with an Indonesian business partner who keeps nodding and saying baik, which means okay, but what they really mean is absolutely not, but I'm too polite to crush your dreams directly. This linguistic complexity isn't just about vocabulary. It reflects Indonesia's cultural obsession with maintaining harmony and avoiding direct confrontation at all costs. You heard right? Indonesians would rather create elaborate verbal mazes than hurt someone's feelings with a simple no. The different ways to refuse include tidak, which is a direct no and considered rude in many contexts, belum, meaning not yet and implying maybe later, sulit, which means difficult and really means unlikely, and kita lihat nanti, or we'll see later, which usually means never. Wait until you find out how this affects business. International companies regularly misinterpret Indonesian politeness as agreement, leading to failed contracts and confused partnerships when the yes they heard actually meant no way. Number 14. Indonesian tribal communities practice a ritual where they dig up deceased family members every 3 years, dress them in new clothes, and take family photos. The Torajan people of South Sulawesi have turned death into an ongoing family relationship that would shock Western sensibilities. Bringing the dead back from the grave, skull cleansing if you're a fan of the weird, read on to find out some of Indonesia's most disturbing traditions. During the Maneni ceremony, families literally excavate their ancestors' graves, carefully clean the mummified remains, dress them in fresh clothing, and pose for cheerful family portraits as if Grandpa just woke up from a nap. You heard right. Death doesn't end your participation in family events in Torajan culture. The preserved bodies, called to Makala, are treated as living family members who are simply sick rather than dead. Think this is just a quick ritual? Think again. The entire ceremony can last several days, with families spending thousands of dollars on new clothes for their deceased relatives, hosting elaborate feasts, and even building new houses for the dead. Here's the mind-bending part. Some families keep their deceased relatives at home for months or even years before the official burial, feeding them, talking to them, and including them in daily activities. Number 13. Indonesia imposes luxury taxes so extreme that a Honda Civic can cost more than a Ferrari in other countries. Indonesia still considers sedans and 4x4 cars to be luxury goods, so they are given extra tax. I don't know about other countries, but the Honda Civic in the picture above can be more expensive than in other countries. The United States, for example. Sounds unbelievable, but Indonesia's luxury car tax reaches up to 200% of the vehicle's base price, turning ordinary family cars into elite status symbols. A Honda Civic that costs $25,000 in America can easily reach $75,000 in Indonesia after taxes and import duties are applied. You won't believe the economic reasoning. The government considers any four-wheeled vehicle a luxury item in a country where most people ride motorbikes, so they tax cars like jewelry or yachts. This creates a bizarre situation where wealthy Indonesians often buy multiple luxury motorcycles instead of one car, since high-end bikes face much lower taxes. Here's the kicker. Many Indonesian families spend more on transportation taxes than housing, and some people take out 10-year loans just to buy a basic sedan. The tax system is so punitive that Indonesia has one of the lowest car ownership rates in Southeast Asia, despite being the region's largest economy. Number 12. Using your left hand for anything social in Indonesia is considered so offensive that it can destroy business relationships and personal friendships. Avoid using your left hand. This could be for touching someone, handing something to someone, or indicating towards something. The left hand is used for all bathroom activities, making it spiritually and culturally unclean in Indonesian society. Picture this. You're at an important business dinner in Jakarta, and you casually hand your business card to a potential partner with your left hand. Congratulations, you've just told them they're worthy only of toilet paper. The taboo runs so deep that many Indonesians feel physically uncomfortable when they see left-handed foreigners eating, writing, or shaking hands naturally. You heard right. Being left-handed in Indonesia requires constant social adaptation and can genuinely impact your career prospects and social relationships. The cultural rule extends beyond just direct contact. Pointing with your left hand, gesturing towards someone, or even wearing your watch on your left wrist can cause offense. Think this only applies to conservative areas? Think again. Even in modern cities like Jakarta and Surabaya, using your left hand inappropriately can mark you as culturally ignorant and disrespectful. Some Indonesian parents actually force left-handed children to learn using their right hand, considering it essential for social acceptance. Number 11. Indonesia has over 300 ethnic groups speaking more than 700 different languages, yet most tourists only experience one tiny slice of this incredible diversity. The country spans 3 time zones and contains more cultural diversity than entire continents. But 90% of international visitors never leave Bali and Jakarta. You won't believe the linguistic complexity. Papua alone has over 270 distinct languages, making it more linguistically diverse than all of Europe combined. Some Indonesian languages are so different from each other that speakers need translators, despite living in the same country. Here's the fascinating part. Many ethnic groups have completely unique customs that seem to belong to different planets. The Mentawai people of Sumatra still practice animism and consider tattoos essential for spiritual protection, while the Dayak people of Borneo traditionally live in 100-meter-long communal houses that can accommodate 50 families. Wait until you find out about the economic impact. This diversity means Indonesia essentially functions as dozens of mini-countries with different trading customs, social rules, and business practices, making it one of the most complex markets in the world for international companies to navigate. Number 10. Indonesian gambling laws are so strict that even playing cards in public can result in immediate arrest, yet underground gambling generates billions of dollars annually. Gambling, also known as punting, is illegal in Indonesia. That's because, for the most part, gambling is run by gangs. However, you'll want to avoid gambling anyway, as a lot of the games are rigged, so foreigners end up owing lots of money. If you lose and are unable to pay, the gangs won't hold back from using extreme collection methods. Think this just means no casinos? Think again. Indonesian police can arrest you for playing poker with friends, owning dice, or even having playing cards visible in public spaces. The penalties include up to 10 years in prison and fines reaching 25 billion rupiah, that's about $1.7 million. You heard right. What Americans consider harmless game night activities can land you in Indonesian prison longer than some violent crimes. Here's where it gets truly bizarre. Despite these draconian laws, Indonesia has one of Southeast Asia's largest illegal gambling industries, with underground operations generating an estimated $40 billion annually. The contradiction is staggering. Authorities raid small private card games while massive illegal gambling rings operate openly in certain areas. Wait until you find out the social impact. Many Indonesian families have been destroyed by gambling debts to criminal organizations, yet the strict laws push the entire industry underground, where it's controlled by violent gangs rather than regulated businesses. Tourists regularly get caught in this system, losing money to rigged games and facing serious legal consequences for activities they considered innocent entertainment. Number 9. Indonesia requires all citizens to choose from only 6 officially recognized religions, making atheism technically illegal and forcing millions into religious categories they don't actually practice. The Pancasila ideology mandates that every Indonesian citizen must declare belief in one supreme being, choosing from Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, or Confucianism. Sounds reasonable until you realize this system forces millions of people into religious boxes that don't match their actual beliefs. You won't believe how this works in practice. Many Indonesian atheists, agnostics, or followers of traditional animist beliefs are forced to register as Muslims, Christians, or Buddhists to obtain identity cards, marry legally, or access government services. The consequences of not choosing a recognized religion include being unable to get married, having children who can't attend school, or facing discrimination in employment and housing. Here's the shocking part. Indonesia's constitution guarantees religious freedom, yet the same government makes non-religious belief essentially impossible to practice openly. This creates a massive underground population of people who publicly claim to follow recognized religions while privately maintaining completely different spiritual beliefs. Think this only affects a small minority? Think again. Anthropologists estimate that millions of Indonesians, particularly in remote areas, still practice traditional animist beliefs while being officially registered as Muslims or Christians. The system also creates bizarre situations where Buddhist temples serve communities that are officially 90% Muslim, or where Catholic churches are filled with people who primarily follow indigenous spiritual practices. Number 8. Indonesian street food vendors operate under a complex social hierarchy system where selling locations are inherited like property, and violating food territory can spark neighborhood wars. Wait until you find out how sophisticated Indonesia's street food politics really are. Every corner, alley, and sidewalk space where vendors sell food operates under unwritten rules more complex than international treaty negotiations. Selling spots are passed down through families for generations, with prime locations in Jakarta worth hundreds of millions of rupiah more than most Indonesian houses. You heard right, a good street corner for selling gado-gado or satay can be worth more than a middle-class family home. The territorial system is enforced by neighborhood associations, local strongmen, and sometimes government officials who all take cuts from vendor profits. Here's where it gets intense. Newcomers who try to set up food stalls in occupied territories face escalating retaliation. Media: tense confrontation between a new vendor and established sellers. Wary glances exchanged between rival food vendors. Vendors might sabotage their food supplies, organize customer boycotts, call health inspectors, or in extreme cases, physically destroy their equipment. Think this sounds like organized crime? You're not entirely wrong. Some street food territories are controlled by the same networks that manage other informal economic activities, creating parallel governance systems that operate alongside official government. The economics are staggering. Successful street food vendors in prime locations can earn 10 to 15 million rupiah per month, making them wealthier than many office workers, while also paying protection fees to multiple local power brokers who ensure their territorial rights remain secure. Number 7. Indonesia has the world's most complex marriage laws, where wedding ceremonies must be conducted according to your official religion, but divorces follow completely different legal systems. Sounds confusing because it absolutely is. Indonesia operates multiple parallel legal systems simultaneously, creating nightmarish bureaucratic situations for couples. Law of Indonesia is based on a civil law system intermixed with local customary law and Dutch law. Before European presence and colonization began in the 16th century, indigenous kingdoms ruled the archipelago independently with their own custom laws, known as adat. If you're Muslim, which is about 87% of the population, your marriage and divorce follow Islamic law administered by religious courts. Christians, Hindus, and Buddhists follow different procedures through civil courts, while traditional communities may follow adat or customary law that can contradict national regulations. You won't believe how complicated this gets. Interfaith couples often can't marry legally in Indonesia at all, forcing them to convert, marry abroad, or live together without legal recognition. Here's the mind-bending part. The same couple might have their marriage recognized under religious law but not civil law, or vice versa, creating legal limbo situations that can last for years. Think it's just paperwork hassles? Think again. These legal contradictions affect property ownership, child custody, inheritance rights, and even the ability to travel internationally as a family. Some Indonesian couples have been married for decades under traditional customs but remain legally single according to government records, while others have multiple conflicting marriage certificates from different legal systems. The complexity has created an entire industry of legal specialists who navigate between religious courts, civil courts, and traditional arbitrators to resolve family disputes. Indonesian drug laws are so extreme that possession of as little as 5 grams of certain substances triggers a mandatory death penalty, but, enforcement varies so wildly that outcomes depend entirely on which island you're arrested on. Here's the terrifying reality. Indonesia actually executes more drug offenders than almost any other country, with these zero-tolerance policies that, honestly, shock even other Southeast Asian nations. The death penalty doesn't just apply to trafficking but also to possession of relatively small amounts. 5 grams of cocaine, 15 grams of heroin, or 1 kilogram of marijuana can result in execution by firing squad. You heard that right? Carrying what many Western countries consider personal use quantities can literally get you killed in Indonesia. And wait until you find out about the enforcement inconsistencies. Getting caught with drugs in Bali might mean prison time and massive bribes. while the same offense in other provinces could mean immediate death sentences with no appeal options at all. The system is so arbitrary that your survival often depends on which police district arrests you, whether local officials feel the need to make examples of foreigners, and how much international attention your case receives. Think having a good lawyer helps? Indonesian drug courts have conviction rates exceeding 95%, and honestly, many defendants never get proper legal representation before being sentenced to death. Here's the most shocking part. Indonesia keeps executing drug offenders even while its own citizens face death sentences for similar offenses in other countries, creating these international diplomatic crises. The government shows zero flexibility. Even terminally ill defendants, pregnant women, and foreign nationals with diplomatic protests have been executed under these laws. Indonesia operates a traditional justice system called adat that runs parallel to government courts, and can sentence people to, well, bizarre punishments like public shaming, forced community service, or ritual cleansing ceremonies. Historically, indigenous kingdoms ruled the archipelago independently with their own custom laws known as adat. These are unwritten, traditional rules still observed in Indonesian society today. Sounds like ancient history, but actually these traditional courts handle thousands of cases every year, and their decisions carry serious social consequences that can either destroy lives or restore community standing. Picture this. You're caught stealing in a traditional Balinese village, and instead of going to the police, you're brought before village elders who sentence you to publicly apologize to the entire community while carrying a heavy stone around the village for 3 days. You won't believe how powerful these traditional courts remain. In many rural areas, adat decisions carry more social weight than government court rulings, and violating traditional sentences can result in complete social ostracism that honestly makes life impossible. The punishments can be surprisingly creative and psychologically intense. Adulterers might be forced to publicly confess their affairs at community meetings. Thieves could be sentenced to work unpaid for their victims for months. Or people who violate cultural taboos might have to undergo purification rituals involving animal sacrifices and spiritual cleansing. Here's where it gets legally complicated. Adat courts operate completely outside Indonesia's official justice system, yet their decisions can affect people's ability to get jobs, marry, own property, or participate in community life. Think you can just ignore traditional justice? Think again. Some communities will refuse to provide basic services like healthcare, education, or even food sales to people who defy adat court rulings. The system creates these parallel legal universes where the same crime might result in prison time in government court and ritual humiliation in traditional court, with both consequences actually applying simultaneously to the same person. Indonesia has over 130 active volcanoes, and millions of people deliberately live directly on their slopes because volcanic soil creates the most fertile agricultural land on Earth. Wait until you find out how Indonesians have turned living with constant volcanic threats into an agricultural advantage that feeds the entire nation. Before European presence and colonization began in the 16th century, indigenous kingdoms ruled the archipelago independently across these volcanic islands, developing sophisticated early warning systems and evacuation procedures that allowed dense populations to thrive in extremely dangerous locations. You heard right. Some Indonesian communities have been living on active volcano slopes for over 1,000 years, developing cultural practices and agricultural techniques specifically designed around periodic eruptions. The volcanic soil, called andesol, is so nutrient-rich that farmers can grow 3 rice crops per year compared to 1 crop on normal soil, making volcanic areas some of the most densely populated rural regions on Earth. Here's the mind-bending part. Indonesian farmers actually monitor volcanic activity themselves, using traditional knowledge passed down through generations to predict eruptions more accurately than some scientific instruments. They've learned to read subtle changes in plant behavior, animal movements, and soil temperature that indicate increasing volcanic activity, allowing entire communities to evacuate and return after eruptions with minimal casualties. Think this sounds too dangerous to be sustainable? Indonesian volcanic agriculture feeds over 140 million people and produces some of the world's highest crop yields per hectare. The risk-reward calculation is so favorable that when volcanoes destroy villages, survivors typically rebuild in the same locations rather than relocate to safer but less fertile areas. Some Indonesian families have been killed and rebuilt by the same volcanoes for dozens of generations, viewing eruptions as natural cycles rather than disasters. Indonesian bureaucracy requires so many stamps, signatures, and approvals that starting a simple business can take over 200 separate government procedures across multiple cities. You heard right. Indonesia has turned bureaucratic complexity into an art form that would make Soviet-era Russia look efficient. Opening a small restaurant requires approximately 15 different licenses from 8 different government agencies, with each license requiring multiple supporting documents that must be certified by other agencies in an endless paper chase. The process involves visiting government offices in multiple cities because different approvals can only be obtained from specific locations, creating a bureaucratic scavenger hunt that can take months or even years to complete. Sounds unbelievable, but many Indonesian entrepreneurs spend more time navigating government paperwork than actually running their businesses. Here's where it gets truly absurd. Some required documents expire before you can obtain other required documents, forcing applicants to restart entire approval processes multiple times. The stamp requirement is legendary. A single business license might need 47 different official stamps from various departments, sub-departments, and verification offices. Think you can hire someone to handle this for you? The Biro Jasa, or service bureau industry, employs hundreds of thousands of people whose entire job is navigating Indonesian bureaucracy for clients, and even these experts sometimes get lost in the procedural maze. Wait until you find out the costs. Businesses often spend 20 to 30% of their startup capital just obtaining required government approvals, not including the time costs of owners or employees dealing with bureaucratic requirements. The system is so complex that successful Indonesian entrepreneurs often joke that surviving the permit process is harder than making the business profitable, and many potential business owners simply give up during the approval process. Indonesia practices a form of Islamic law in Aceh province that includes public flogging for adultery, gambling, and drinking alcohol, yet bars and nightclubs operate openly just 100 kilometers away in other provinces. This represents one of the world's most dramatic examples of legal contradiction within a single country, where the same activities that result in public beatings in one province are completely legal entertainment in neighboring areas. The people of Aceh in Sumatra, for instance, observe their own Sharia law, while the rest of Indonesia follows civil and customary law systems. Picture this: you can drink beer legally in a Jakarta nightclub, fly to Banda Aceh, about 90 minutes away, and be sentenced to public caning for possessing the same beer. You won't believe how strictly Aceh enforces these laws. Religious police patrol streets looking for violations, raid private homes suspected of hosting parties, and conduct surprise inspections of hotels for unmarried couples sharing rooms. The public caning ceremonies draw crowds of spectators and are broadcast on local television as moral education for the community. Here's the shocking part: these punishments apply to everyone in Aceh, including non-Muslims and foreign tourists, creating situations where visitors face severe physical punishment for behaviors that are completely normal elsewhere in Indonesia. Think the enforcement is just for show? Aceh conducts dozens of public floggings monthly with punishments ranging from 8 to 100 lashes depending on the offense. The contrast creates bizarre border effects where Indonesian travelers change their behavior completely when crossing into Aceh, and some Indonesian airlines refuse to serve alcohol on flights to Banda Aceh to avoid accidental violations. The system demonstrates how Indonesia operates as a collection of semi-autonomous regions with dramatically different social rules, rather than a unified nation with consistent laws. Indonesia contains the world's most linguistically diverse province where villagers just 10 kilometers apart can't understand each other at all. Yet this same region produces 40% of the world's tropical timber and gold. This is really the ultimate Indonesian paradox that reveals how the country functions as a collection of isolated micro-civilizations that just happen to share the same flag. Papua province contains over 270 distinct languages, more than entire continents, with some villages maintaining completely unique cultures, spiritual beliefs, and social systems, even though they're separated by just a few hours of walking through jungle terrain. You heard right. You can literally walk from one village to another and encounter people who might as well be from different planets in terms of language, customs, and worldview. Here's the mind-blowing part. This incredible diversity exists alongside some of the world's largest extractive industries, with multinational corporations operating massive logging and mining operations that generate billions of dollars annually, while local communities sometimes don't even have access to electricity or clean water. The contrast is staggering. Satellite internet connects mining executives to global commodity markets, while indigenous people just kilometers away live in traditional houses without any modern technology and maintain spiritual beliefs centered around forest spirits and ancestor worship. Think this creates obvious conflicts? The situation is incredibly complex. Some Papua communities have become wealthy through resource extraction partnerships, while others fight desperately to protect their traditional territories from industrial development. Wait until you find out the most shocking aspect. Many of these linguistically isolated communities possess traditional ecological knowledge about rainforest management, medicinal plants, and sustainable hunting practices that could be crucial for global environmental conservation. Yet this knowledge is disappearing faster than scientists can document it. Some Papua languages become extinct every year when their last speakers die, taking with them thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about living sustainably in one of Earth's most biodiverse ecosystems. The irony is just devastating. The same region that could teach the world about environmental sustainability is being rapidly transformed by resource extraction that destroys the very ecosystems these communities have successfully managed for millennia. So we've just discovered Indonesia's most mind-bending contradictions, from death penalties for small drug amounts to 270 languages in one province, and bureaucracy so complex it employs armies of professional navigators. Which one shocked you the most? Have you ever experienced Indonesia's incredible diversity beyond the tourist hotspots? Subscribe for more hidden truths about countries that will completely shatter your assumptions about our world.